Well, greetings, Pastor Eric here from Zion Lutheran Church in beautiful Redmond. We're on the fourth I am saying of Jesus. This time, it's John chapter 10, verse 11, where Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. This is after he talks about being the gate, the door. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. The hired hand who is not a shepherd, does not know the sheep, that knows why, all that stuff. So Jesus says, I am the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep. Now, just as a point of reference, when the people to whom John was writing heard Jesus say, I am the good shepherd, boom, marker. They would go immediately back to think of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. So what Jesus does by saying, I'm the good shepherd, because he talks about shepherd and all that kind of stuff in the other Gospels, but he doesn't say, I am the good shepherd, except here in John chapter 10, verse 11. So when Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, their minds go right back to Psalm 23, which is really, for us, the most famous psalm about God being our protector and our guide in life. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, contrasting him with those who pretend to care for their sheep, pretender shepherds. The hired hand will lead the sheep but doesn't have ultimate care for them, because a hired hand is interested in getting that paycheck and putting the own concerns over the concerns of the sheep. But Jesus, the good shepherd, cares for the sheep because we are his sheep. We belong to him. We belong to God. God made us. That's why God loves us and wants to care for us, the others. So their minds would have gone right back to Psalm 23. So let's think for a moment about Psalm 23, written centuries before Jesus, but it set the stage for Jesus saying, I am the good shepherd. So Psalm 23 was probably written by King David later in his life as a psalm of assurance, and as a psalm which was their songbook. The psalm is really a song, okay? And the way that they remembered that is there was an old Hebrew style of poetry or songs that put things in a common format. There are 6 verses in Psalm 23. I'll read that in a moment. And it's a poetic pattern where the first and last express parallel ideas, as do the second and fifth, as do the third and fourth. So the heart of the poem comes in the middle verses, in verses 3 and 4. So if you were to write out the poem, a diagram, it would be 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now that'll make sense in a moment. That means that verses 1 and 6 both express the same thing about God, that God is faithful in being present with us. First, verses 1 and 6 read in this way. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. In verse 6, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. God is faithful in being present with us. That means that when Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, it says, God is going to be faithful. I'm going to be faithful to you. I will never leave you. I will never abandon you no matter what. Sometimes it takes years to really grasp onto that and really believe it. I personally think that younger folks sometimes, when a difficulty comes up, they figure, well, God didn't protect me, so they eject on their faith. But when there are people who stick with it through life, no matter what kind of difficulty comes, really it's the older folks who have a lifetime of faith, who have the spiritual maturity to know that God is present with us no matter what, through thick and thin. That's verses 1 and 6. Verses 2 and 5 express similar thoughts, and that is that God is faithful not only in his being present with us, but also in providing for us. Being present and providing. Let me read verses 2 and verse 5, which read this way. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. You prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup overflows. So that underlines how God is faithful in how God provides for us. God is faithful not only with food for the body, the manna, but also rest and security for the soul as well. Jesus, the Good Shepherd, does that for us with keeping us close to him, security in the soul. And again, the older you get, I don't consider myself in that category. In fact, when I go into Fred Meyer on the first Tuesday of the month, they say, you're a senior, aren't you? And I say, well, yeah, how'd you know? Not that I'm a senior, but I do get my senior discount. But the older you get, sometimes the more you realize that God is faithful in what God provides for us, where sometimes younger folks kind of eject. That's why it's so important to have a lifelong faith. The center of Psalm 23 is God is faithful in how God protects us, verses 3 and 4. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. God is faithful in his presence, in his provision and protection. God is faithful in protecting us, even in the face of death itself. It doesn't promise us, this psalm, as Jesus being the Good Shepherd, doesn't promise us an escape from the valley of the shadow of death. It doesn't say, well, if I walk. It says, though I walk, or when I walk, I will fear no evil, for thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I'm just reminded of a college student, story of a college student, Charles Murray. He was a college student preparing for the Summer Olympics at the University of Cincinnati. He had not grown up in a religious family. He had no opportunity to go to church. When he met a group of Christian men on campus, they started talking to him about how he mattered to God and how God loved him and cared for him. He was initially quite skeptical because he didn't grow up in church, but he was interested. One evening he decided to call his Christian friend and ask him, well, tell me again about those Bible verses about how much God loves me and that Jesus died for me. And his friend shared those verses. So after he heard those verses about God providing, protecting him, he decided to go over to the college pool and do some practice diving. He was preparing for the Olympics, and he had special privilege. He could go into the pool even when it was closed. At the University of Cincinnati, it was a pool that had a high glass ceiling, so when Charles went in, the lights were off, but there was a full moon and he could see enough to get in. He climbed the 10-meter, 30 feet, 33 feet diving platform to do his practice backward dive, and as he turned around and stretched out his arms, he looked down and saw the moonlight had caused a shadow to fall on the wall behind him in the shape of a cross. Charles looked at it, and for the first time, seeing that cross and hearing his friend share those Bible verses about God loving and caring for us, he felt in his heart the love of God. He realized that Christ had died for him. He realized at that moment that he mattered to God, and so he sat down on that diving deck and he opened his heart and his life to God. He was still sitting there praying when a custodian came on and flipped the lights on, which startled him. But what startled him more was that he looked down at the pool and realized that the pool had been emptied for cleaning. Had he taken that dive, he would have died. He would have never realized that he mattered to God. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. All of that is encompassed when Jesus says to his disciples, I'm the Good Shepherd. transporting your minds back into Psalm 23. Jesus is the Good Shepherd. That means that we can live our lives with meaning and purpose. That means that we can be freed from the fear of death. That means that we can know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God loves you and cares for you like a shepherd loves and cares for his sheep, because they matter to the shepherd and you matter to God. I'm going to close with the May 6th Jesus calling, which reads, "Do not search for security in the world you inhabit. You tend to take mental checklists of things you need to do in order to gain control of your life. If only you could check everything off your list, you could relax and be at peace, but the more you work to accomplish that goal, the more things crop up on your list. The harder you try, the more frustrated you become. There's a better way. To find security in this life, instead of scrutinizing your checklist, focus your attention on God's presence with you. This continual contact will keep you in God's peace. Moreover, God will help you sort out what is important and what is not, what needs to be done now and what does not. Fix your eyes on what is seen, that is your circumstances, but fix your eyes not on what is seen, that is my circumstances, but rather what is unseen, with God's presence with you, because Jesus is the Good Shepherd." You take care. I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.